I stared across the desk at my father, barely recognizing the man who had abandoned our family 15 years earlier. His expensive suit couldn't hide the desperation in his eyes. He leaned forward, his voice a mixture of entitlement and charisma. I remembered it all too well. "Come on, Emily," he said, spreading his hands in what he probably thought was a disarming gesture. "My name is Emily Chin. At 35, I was the CEO of Chente Innovations, a company I built from nothing into a $10 million business." The irony of my father's presence here now, after years of silence, is not lost on me. He left when I was 20, leaving my mother and me with nothing but debt and broken promises. Just like you shared in our struggles when you left, just like you shared in Mom's medical bills when she got sick, he looks uncomfortable, but it's only for a moment. What's past is past. Emily, I've changed. I've learned from my mistakes. And now he gestures to my office, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline. And now look at you. You're already doing great. I take a long, hard look at him. Noticed he was wearing designer watches that probably cost more than the monthly rent we used to pay. Neatly manicured nails and perfectly coiffed hair. He looked successful, but I knew better. My private investigator had investigated thoroughly. Dad's gambling habits hadn't changed the stakes, had just gotten bigger. He'd burned through his third wife's inheritance, and there was a rumor going around that he owed money to some dangerous people. Why ask me now? Was it just me have known the answer for 15 years, and Dad hasn't called once? Not even when Mom died, he didn't call. I was in a bad mood, but I recovered quickly. "Emily, I can't face you both because it's all in the past, but I've been following the news of your successes. Chente's breakthroughs in renewable energy storage, the government contracts, the Forbes features." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "I'm proud of you, my dear." Those were once words I longed to hear, but now they ring hollow with the desperation behind them. Where was he when I nearly lost my fortune in a patent lawsuit against a major corporation? Where was his pride and support? I stood up and walked over to the window, the fall rain in Seattle leaving its mark on the glass, and I remembered another rainy day 15 years ago when he walked out of the house for the last time. "You know what I got from you, Dad? I've learned that when people want something from you, they'll say anything. I've also learned that pedigree doesn't mean loyalty." He stood up. His hands were shaking. "Listen. No, you listen." I said, my voice was shaking. "You want money? Come back tomorrow at noon and I'll have something for you." He didn't know what to expect, but for the first time in 15 years, I was really glad to see him, because tomorrow he would know what a smart girl he had helped create. That night, as I sat in my loft reviewing the documents my attorney had prepared, my cell phone rang. It was Alice, my best friend from college and now the chief legal officer. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. I believe me. "Alice, I know exactly what I'm doing. Emily, I've seen this scene before. He'll just take whatever you give him and come back for more. Men like that, they're never satisfied." I know that, I said, looking at the papers spread out on my coffee table. And that was enough. Opening the bottom drawer of my desk, which is a battered shoebox filled with newspaper clippings, old photographs, and documents I've collected over the years, every story about my father's failing business, every court transcript of his divorces, every proof of his schemes and betrayals. I've got it all. And some might say I'm obsessed with keeping such detailed records, but I learned a long time ago that information is power. And I don't ever want to be powerless anymore. I pulled out a special photo of my college graduation. My mom was there, skinny and tired from the first round of chemo, but she was smiling proudly. We sent Dad an invitation, more out of obligation than hope. He didn't show up, of course, but he did send a text. "Sorry, kid. Things are tight right now. Maybe next time." I stayed up all night, making sure every detail was perfect. The paperwork had to be from the IRS. The timing had to be spot on. And when I finally went to bed, the rain had stopped and a strange calmness gripped me. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. My assistant, James, was already there. He was organizing his schedule for the day. Your father's appointment had been set for noon. He knew enough about my past so he could understand the significance of the meeting. I said, walking towards my office, making sure the security was ready but discreet, and telling Alice to come up as soon as she arrived. The morning rushed by in meetings and phone calls, but my thoughts drifted all the way to the envelope sitting in my desk drawer, containing everything my father thought he wanted and everything he didn't think he would want at the 11th hour. 55, my phone rang. He was here. James had texted, and I took a deep breath, straightened my jacket, and prepared for what could have been the last conversation I would ever have with my father as he strides into my office, somehow looking more confident than yesterday. The smile on his face reminds me of a shark that has found its prey. If only he knew who the real predator, Emily Sweetheart, was. I gestured to the chair across the desk and motioned for him to sit down. Dad, we have a lot to talk about. And he sat almost expectantly as I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the envelope he'd been dying to see, and then put it out of his reach and said, I want to tell you a story about something that happened after you left, and I'm still keeping the envelope out of his reach after he's gone. Mom and I had exactly $247 in our checking account. Do you remember how much you took when you cleaned it out? His face tensed even more, but he kept his smile. Emily, that's all in the past. We don't need toes. Oh, but we do. I interrupted and steadied my voice because what happened next had a lot to do with what was in the envelope. The Space Needle pierced through the early morning fog. Mom got another job working the night shift at the diner. She was so tired she could barely stand up, but she kept working because she believed in me and that I could make a difference. You know what keeps me going? Every time I want to give up, I remember that you said I couldn't do anything without you. I grimace. I have a good memory for details. Dad, it's one of my best qualities. I sit back down at my desk. I open my laptop and you want to know what I remember? I pulled up the file on the screen and turned to face him. His confident face cracked slightly. How did you do it? I've been watching you for 15 years, and I'll make it simple. Every move, every plan, every failure, I knew one day you'd show up here thinking you'd get a piece of my success. So I made sure that his eyes flicked to the envelope in my hand and back to my face. No matter what you think. You know, I know all about the money you owe. Marcus, I said, looking at him pale at the name that had nothing to do with me. Unfortunately, I knolled you to pay back the $2 million you borrowed by the end of the month. I know everything, Dad. He stood up so suddenly that his chair scraped the floor. This is ridiculous. I'm here to reconnect with my daughter, to make amends. No, I said it calmly. You're here because you're desperate, because of every bridge you've built on lies and charm. I opened the envelope and pulled out a piece of paper. It's a contract. It provides you with everything you want, financial security. All you have to do is sign. I pressed a button on my desk, and Alice walked into the office with another set of papers. My father's eyes darted between us, confusion replacing his confidence. Yes, I'm putting 2 documents behind the door. The first one, you sign this contract, and you get $5 million, enough to pay off Marcus's Chanter debt and start a new life. But in exchange, you have to legally relinquish any right to any claims against Chanter. You have no right to contact me or my employees, and you agree to keep our family history completely private. He licked his lips nervously. Door number 2, I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're not taking anything with you. Tomorrow morning, every news outlet in Seattle will receive a detailed dossier on your colorful business history, including some very interesting documents about your current corporate financial practices. You won't whisper, but we both know that he doesn't believe it, and neither do I. I asked you softly. You taught me well, Dad. Never let anything go. Always have a chip on your shoulder. That's what you taught me, isn't it? Everything is in order. I've confirmed it. The only question is whether you're smart enough to take the deal. Alice took a step forward and placed a pen on the table between us. The choice is yours, Mr. Chan, but I'd like to remind you that the deal will expire in 10 minutes. My father stared at the pen, then looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. You really are my daughter, he said calmly. No, I replied, my voice firm. I am my mother's daughter. She taught me perseverance, integrity, and love. You taught me the consequences of lacking all three. As he signed the contract, I thought of my mother, who didn't live to see Shantae's success, but who believed in me until the very end. At this moment, this victory was as much hers as it was mine. Alice quickly notarized the document and handed it to my father. He nodded and held the envelope tightly as if it were a lifesaver. As the security guards came to escort him out, he turned back one last time. "Emily, I'll see you and Dad later," I said, having turned back to my computer. "I'm sure you'll find your way out of here." He walked away, and Alice stayed behind, looking at me carefully. "Are you okay?" I let out a long breath that I hadn't realized I had been holding. For the first time in 15 years, I felt free. 5 million was a lot of money, she observed, even for Shante. I smiled, thinking about what she didn't know yet. It was worth every penny to make sure he never came back. Besides, I turned the laptop around to show her the money shown on the screen wasn't from Shante. We just made $12 million, enough to pay off Dad's debt and then some. Alice shook her head in amazement and laughed. "You really have thought of everything." The morning fog had completely lifted, and the city was bright and clear. It felt like a sign that the shadows of my past had finally lifted, paving the way for everything that was to come. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the old shoebox that held my papers. All these years I'd been tracking down my father, gathering evidence, preparing for this moment. I didn't need anything anymore. I figured it was time for the employee appreciation lunch I'd been promising. Time to focus on the people who really deserved my attention. My team, my friends, my family. The people I'd chosen for myself. News of my father's sudden wealth and then disappearance quickly spread through the Seattle business community. Speculation ran rampant. Some said I had paid him off. Some said he had blackmailed me. Our renewable energy division was exceeding all expectations, and new government contracts were going well. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm without having to wait for my father's booking. Miss Chen appeared on my doorstep. "There was someone here to see you. She said she was your sister." Behind James, a young woman appeared in my line of sight. She couldn't have been more than 20 years old, with familiar dark eyes that made my heart beat faster. She said nervously, "Hello, I'm Grace Morgan. David Chan is my father." Grace sat awkwardly on the edge of the chair my father had sat in 3 months earlier, and up close, her resemblance to my father was undeniable. Her jaw was as tense and fidgety as my father's. I went over everything about her, about the rest of his family, about you and your mom, about Chant, and she put her hands on her knees and twisted them around. And I always knew he wasn't a good person, but I didn't realize how bad he was until now. Because I'm going to college next semester, actually studying engineering, and I don't want his money. I don't want anything from him. And I think maybe you understand that better than anyone. I asked her I got into MIT, a hint of pride in her nervousness, but I'm still thinking about Grant's mom's a teacher and Dad's gone. It turned the screen to her and showed her the details of the Chent internship program. We offer full scholarships, top promising engineering students. The deadline for applications is a month away here. Yes widened. "Are you implying that I'm implying that you're like the rest of the candidates? Apply, Grace, no special treatment. But if you're halfway determined to succeed, I think you'll do well. I won't let you down. Don't worry about letting me down," I told her. "Focusing on not letting yourself down. That's the only criteria that matters." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Alice. She said, "You look lost in thought." I smiled as I texted her back. She reminded me that sometimes the best revenge isn't retaliation. It's helping others rise above themselves. The technology we're developing could revolutionize the accessibility of renewable energy in the developing world. And it's exactly the kind of world-changing job I dreamed of when I was still working 3 jobs to pay for engineering school. James called from the front desk. "Miss Chen, there's a package for you." A few minutes later, I was staring at a small, tattered envelope with a return address to an Arizona law firm, but I immediately recognized it as my mother's handwriting, which she must have arranged to have delivered years after her death. "I asked my attorney to hold this letter until your father died, and I know that your father's absence is a wound that will never heal, that you were always stronger than he was, smarter than he was, better than he was, not because of his genes or his lessons, but because of the choices you made. That every sacrifice, every late night, every obstacle you overcame, it was you, rather. It was you who had to prove yourself right, Mom. I held the letter to my chest, letting the tears flow freely. After a while, I picked up the phone and dialed Grace's number. It's Emily. Listen to me. Why are you coming in tomorrow? As the sun was setting and the Seattle sky was tinged with pink and gold from my office window, I could see the Chent logo shining on the building across the street. No longer my father's name, but a symbol of what my mother and I had built from scratch. Sometimes the best revenge isn't to make someone else pay for their mistakes. Sometimes the best revenge isn't to make someone else pay for their mistakes. Sometimes the best revenge isn't to make someone else pay for their mistakes, but to prove that you were right. Mom, paying the price. Sometimes the best revenge is to build a great family and make their absence irrelevant. Sometimes the best revenge is to turn their greatest failure, abandoning their family, into your greatest triumph. I looked at the picture on my desk of my mother when I graduated from college, thin but smiling, her eyes full of pride and love. I thought of my mother's words, proving yourself right. That's what it's all about. It's not about the money. It's not about the success. It's not even about the satisfaction of beating your father. It's about proving that love, determination, and integrity can create something more powerful than any wealth or legacy. Tomorrow, I'll begin to teach Grace everything my mother taught me, and together, we'll write a new chapter in the story of the Kim family. Daughters will rise from the ashes of their father's failures to create something good.